There's definitely so many periods, dark days, but luckily, because we were so opposite, one of us will be up while the other one's down, and then the other one will be up while the other one's down. So we do kind of bring each other out of the abyss.
When life imitates art, you're just like a kettlebell swing.
True, you get it.
This is All Things Fitness and Wellness, hosted by Krissy Vann. Together, we're uniting industry thought leaders and fitfluencers on the mission to inspire innovation and encourage people to live a life fit and well. On today's episode, we welcome Nikolai and Amber Puchlov of Pro Kettlebell. At the time of release, we're approaching the 4th anniversary of when a worldwide pandemic was declared shutting down businesses. According to stats from IHRSA, by the end of 2020, 17% of clubs permanently closed, industry revenue fell by 58% relative to 2019 sales, and 44% of the fitness industry workforce lost jobs. Amber and Nikolai were in the throes of it all, having to shut the doors of their gym, the Seattle Kettlebell Club. On the episode, you'll learn how they made the leap from hospitality to the fitness industry in the first place, how closing their business became a catalyst to bringing a new business venture to life, and on that note, why they reinvented the kettlebell. Their story is an entrepreneurial roller coaster with important lessons learned along the way and new perspectives brought to light. Before we get to the episode, be sure to hit like and subscribe. I'd be so appreciative if you left a review and connect with me on Instagram at All Things Fitness and Wellness. I'm your host, Krissy Vann, and this is ATFW. I am so happy to have you both, Amber and Nikolai, here. I know that you have a story that didn't necessarily start within the fitness industry. I believe from what I was told that it was hospitality that was the background. So talk to me a little bit about where your career journeys began.
I've always worked in hospitality since I was like 11 years old, really. I started off selling candy door to door, and then, worked in a bakery, espresso bar. But I met Amber at a pizzeria called Tutabella, and I was the manager. I was the front of house manager there, and we were looking for wait staff, and I interviewed Amber, and she was a great interview, and
That's not true, actually.
Tell me more.
I heard that I probably wouldn't have gotten a call back from that interview.
That's not true.
But okay.
It was
Let's settle the score here.
She did a fine interview. I interviewed a lot of people, but it just so happened that she nannied for a friend of one of the investors of the business. And the investor's name was Matt Kellogg, like Kellogg's Frosted Flakes.
Kellogg.
So he's a Kellogg, right? And Matt Kellogg called me, and Matt Kellogg never calls me. And I'm like, hey, Matt, what's up? He's like, yeah, I heard you interviewed Amber at Amber Cutlet today. And I'm like, oh, yeah. He's like, how was she? I was like, oh, she was pretty good. He's like, I think you should hire her. And I'm like, okay, I'll consider that. And he goes, no, I think you should hire her. And I'm like, all right. Like, this was not like
You're being told, but not told.
Yeah. And anyways, but it did. It turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. We actually started dating shortly thereafter, and then one of us had to go, and you were the first to go, right? Or was I?
Don't remember anymore.
Yeah, one of us had to go, so we changed. I think you left first, and then I left shortly after that. But anyways, we've spent a decade and a half apiece, so like 3 decades combined. And I worked in Nordstrom too, in hospitality. She's worked in hotels.
My first job out of high school was at the Salish Lodge, which is a very fancy hotel around here. So
I bartended, and so actually I got into fitness because I quit drinking when I turned 30, and I was bartending. And so bartending and drinking, and then turning 30, midlife crisis type thing. I'd always had a personal trainer, like since I was 24. And that's another interesting kind of scenario, how a 24-year-old has a personal trainer. But
yeah, I'm like, please let's get to the 30s, but tell me about the 24 personal trainer, because that's true. That's like a great choice.
So when I started working at this restaurant, Tutabella, I started off at the bottom as a busboy, and I was poor. I had no money, but I wanted to join a gym because I was really skinny. And in high school, I had exercised just randomly because it helped me deal with like the hormones and the stress. I enjoyed, doing body weight exercises and curls for, for the biceps and stuff. But there was a gym kitty corner to the restaurant. It was called Bull Stewart Fitness. And it had basically a likeness of Bull Stewart, which is basically a huge power lifter guy, bald. And it was very much like a hole in the wall gym. It looked like a power lifter's gym. I was scared, but I wanted to join a gym, and I wanted to put on some weight because I was really skinny. I was underweight, in my opinion. And so I walked in there, and lo and behold, there's Bull. I'm like, that's the guy on the signage. And he, despite his appearance of being like, 260, bald and ripped to shreds, like he was the nicest guy ever. He's a Southern guy from Tupelo, Mississippi. He showed me around the gym. He showed me a bunch of different exercises and like took me through a full body workout. But at no point did he ever make me feel like I was an idiot because I didn't know anything. He was just very knowledgeable and supportive, and he kept telling me how I had potential, how I had potential, how I had potential. And then at the end of it, though, he hit me with, so would you, how'd you like your session? I was like, this is great. This is the best thing I've ever, it's awesome. He's like, how would you like to, do training a couple times a week? And I'm like, whoa, Bull. I just started working like next door, like last week. I can't even remember how little I was making. It was like $12 an hour or something like that. And he's like, I can't afford personal training. And he's like, well, what can you afford? And I'm like, $40. He's like, great. How about we do $40 a session twice a week? We'll do 30-minute sessions. So, and I'm like, how can I say no to this guy? You know what I mean? He's like, he was so big, he's twice my size, and he was so nice, and he just taken me through all this stuff. And it turns out he actually had a kind of a sales and hospitality background too. But other than that, he's just like, he was not what I was expecting from someone who is a personal trainer. He was empathetic. He didn't want me to overdo it, and he didn't let me fail. You know what I mean? Like, even though I was doing things wrong, I know I was doing things wrong at that time. He just let me kind of go through it. And I felt like with him, I was like a winner. I had done sports in the past, as a kid, but like, I never had any coach like really take interest in me and be like, oh, this guy can do something special. I was like average growing up. I'm actually getting a little choked up thinking about it because he took me from like average to like make me believe in myself and excel. He got me into powerlifting. I learned a ton, and he was like a mentor to me. My dad was not around as much, and I was always looking for male, role model figures, whether it was a boss or in his case it was, my trainer, and I was asking him a million questions to the point where I'm sure I annoyed him. And but I was like taking mental notes. And then when it came time for me to like leave the restaurant industry, he was like, Nikolai, why don't you come work for me?
So now you have him kind of pulling you over into the fitness industry direction. So how does this go down?
It had been 6 years of working with him, straight nonstop. I'd made a lot of progress. I felt like he was like, you get certified, and you come work here and work as an independent contractor. He worked out a split with me. I mentioned this to Amber, and Amber's like,
she's shaking her head.
no, don't do this.
He wanted to quit. He was like, I'm done with the restaurant. I'm done. I'm not going back. I'm going to be a personal trainer. I'm like, well, that's great, but don't quit your job. Like, start doing that, get some clients, and then quit.
Little safety net.
And he was not having that. He's like, no, I'm done. I'm not going back.
Pulled the parachute.
So that was very stressful for me, because I remember we were on our way to Arizona to visit my parents, and we were on the plane, and I'm doing the math, and I'm like, you realize that you're going to have 13 clients a day at the 30-minute rate. Like, you'll have to have 30 clients a day just to make what you're making now every day. It's like, this is ridiculous. And 3 months later, he was 6 a.m., 9 p.m., booked solid the whole time. He was turning people away.
4:30 a.m. That's when I was
I'm
starting.
sorry, you're right. It was 4:30
a.m.
It was
Amazing.
4:30 a.m. But I was not pleased in the beginning. But Bo also, he was very kind to, he called me Ms. Nikolai. Ms. Nikolai, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Nikolai, don't worry about it.
Because he could see the potential of where this was headed. So what happens at this point? Because I know this journey ultimately leads you to opening your own gym at some point. So
Yeah.
where does this pivot come, and how are you both feeling about that life choice?
So as I'm becoming more, successful at this gym, I'm bringing in probably more money than I've made before. I'm also bringing in the gym a lot of money. Somewhere along the way, I hurt my back squatting,
Mm,
and I it was really bad to where I was dragging my left leg around. And another guy who Dick Schuler, who was always around the gym. He was a bit older, but he was kind of a friend of and mentor of Bull Stewart. He's like, Nikolai, you should try kettlebells. It'll help strengthen your joints, and it might help rehab that back of yours. And so I got into kettlebells at the gym, and he recommended I talk to this guy Tom Corrigan, who's like early days RKC instructor and very knowledgeable. Just happened to live within an hour of me. And Tom Corrigan trained me up, and I fell in love with kettlebells. I was like, should have been doing the entire time. It's built for my body type. I working on all planes of motion. I'm getting cardio because I was built probably more to be a dancer than a power lifter. I'm kind of long and lean.
yeah.
And anyways, I fell in love with it, and so I'm incorporating these kettlebell exercises with all of my clients, and my clients are loving it and having good success with it. And I'm like, Bull, I want to do kettlebell classes, and he's kind of let me do the kettlebell classes, and the kettlebell classes start taking off a little bit. And I'm seeing this in my head. I'm like, I can really help more people if I'm doing this in a class format or a group format, and it's growing, growing, growing.
Interjection. Meanwhile, I'm like, wait a minute, you're giving up your personal training clients so that they can pay less money to go in a class. This is not going to work. So I'm constantly interjecting my opinions, to which get dismissed.
Yeah. I mean, she was right in the short term,
Yeah.
but I could see that, like, if I'm doing one-on-one, the max people I could help a day was probably, at one point I did like 16 clients in a day. It was so draining.
And we had a brand new baby. Like this is the
Oh,
same
wow,
year that we
yeah.
got married. And then right after we got married, got pregnant. So like it all happened really fast.
But here I am. I have all these ambitions to do these classes. And at a certain point, we had created this business called Striker Fit, where I had taken other certified instructors, and I was getting so many clients that I would channel my surplus clients to these new instructors, but they were not doing well with keeping their clients. And so that wouldn't work. Their turnover was too high. But when I had them teach kettlebell classes, I found that like that one-on-one, it was just different. On one-on-one basis, you really have to have a connection with the client, but in a class setting, you can kind of interchange the instructors a little easier. And so that was working as well. And so I would write the classes, and then they would instruct the classes. But Bull and I, and Bull's wife Flo, and then me and Amber, like, we just couldn't quite get on the same page about where we wanted things to go. And this is a story that I think a lot of personal trainers have with like the gym owners. Like, they're seeing their business start to grow, and the gym owner kind of likes the way things are. And
It's two
there's just,
visions in the same
yeah,
space, right? And there's
yeah. I mean,
nothing wrong and inherently wrong with that, because that's what growth is. But it is difficult when you do have two people with two separate visions, and especially when you're really passionate and feel like you've got something.
right. And he's 25 years older than me. He's got an established business. I'm taking risks. Be like, whoa, Nikolai, you taking risks with my business and my clients,
Right.
and which is totally right. Like, understandable. Anyways, we had a falling out for a bit. And this was after he was the best man at my wedding. And here I am with a 1998 Jeep Cherokee full of kettlebells and a handful of clients. And I started doing like mobile training. with my kettlebells, doing park classes, going to people's houses. I did this thing called How About We, which was like basically a dating site, and like people would choose like, how about we learn how to do kettlebells? And so I drive to their house and teach these like couples on a first date how to do
Oh my
kettlebells.
gosh,
So
that's
awkward.
And
so
then-
innovative, but awkward. Yeah.
Right.
Can
And
you
then
imagine the date goes bad? I bet you
You're
have
gonna come back
stories.
with such great stories.
Yeah.
so sometimes, like a
Grab the
lot of times,
popcorn.
the date would be like going well, and they'd be like, making eyes at each other, and I'm like,
Yeah, you're like, when do
you
I make an
like,
exit? But you're paying
I
for
got-
the next half hour.
I know, or like, it was so awkward. I
Oh
couldn't.
gosh.
I mean,
In the era of OnlyFans, that could be a terrifying thing to walk into too.
it's just back. Yeah, and I mean, I've got some stories about some of those couples, but guess what?
Oh, no.
One of those couples actually turned into, they wound up getting married. They have a child, and they introduced me to another couple, Ravi and Yoko, that actually, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but they actually helped loan me some money so we could start a gym. And so I have to thank How About We, and I don't even know, they're probably not around anymore. It was like one of these Seattle startups, that kind of rises and falls really quick.
Hey, it served a purpose, clearly.
It did, but there were some rough times. There were dark days during,
Yeah.
because I had no gym to get new clients from. I mean, that's one of the benefits of working in a gym, is
For
that
sure.
always new people coming in. You could always get new clients. Well, now I'm like, how many people have space for a personal trainer to come over to their house and do this thing? And I was always looking for a place to train. And I wound up renting space from a gentleman named Chris, that his gym was Rich Fitness. And I started Seattle Kettlebell Club at that gym, outside underneath a tent. And because it's in Seattle and it rains all the time. And
We feel you here in Vancouver.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You're
Yeah.
Vancouver.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Anyway,
It's a tent, but like it was a patio with a like carport, tent
Right.
thing over there. It was 10 by 30.
we called it the
like
revival
really
tent.
long and skinny.
We strung boxing lights, and it was actually,
Perfect.
Yeah.
I actually am very nostalgic about that tent, because at the time it was like,
It was so
perfect.
amazing.
It was like, I thought this is the best thing ever, because we had a roof over our head. And-
Definitely.
and
You did kind of skim over. We did park classes nonstop to build a client base. So we would do, and they were free, but I would do, get everybody's emails and build a list that way. And
Smart.
I did not, I mean, I had at this point, like I had been waiting tables until our son was born, and I was like, I'm not going back to that. So I'm all in to do whatever I can to help this take off. So we were going to every park in Seattle and posting posters about the classes coming up, and posted on every neighborhood site, blog, just as much free marketing on the ground, begging people to come to these classes as we could. But it did pay
It
off.
worked.
So
Yeah.
after doing that, we had some people to come to our new tent and get into our class.
we had a handful of people, and it grew at Ridge Fitness, so much so that the neighbor called, was calling the police in the morning because the music was too loud, because we're teaching 6 a.m. classes. And then another
Couldn't
crisis
recruit
unity,
them, eh? You're like, rise and shine, your workout's ready.
right? And then, so the owner, Chris, he was put in a tough position where he had to ask us to, find a new place to do business at, and gave us a week's time. And so,
Oh,
like,
wow.
in a week, we had to find a new space. So Craigslist was my friend there. I found a photography studio that was like down the road. And I called him and I said, hey, would you let us teach classes there instead of doing photography? And he's like, yeah, sure. Now, he didn't really let us know that he actually lived in this studio too.
Oh
And
my
like, he would come out in the
That
morning.
is so
like,
Pacific Northwest.
yeah, he'd come out in the morning in his underwear and go like make himself some eggs or whatever in the middle of like the class.
Amazing.
And these people, these beautiful people that like followed us around, like they didn't even bat an eye. They just like kept coming to classes. And eventually he got a girlfriend and they were together for a little while. And then it'd be
The
like,
girlfriend was not
she
having
was
us.
not, she was not having us. But there was a space it was at the bottom of a condo. It became available for lease. And just as we were getting kicked out of our next space, this other space became available. And that's when we,
So that was the first space that we got that was actually like
ours,
we had
signed
the
a lease.
key. It was ours. It was 1,087 square feet. So it was so small. The windows didn't open, which is a hard call when you're in the gym. So then you have to open the door, but it would like get so sweaty and hot in there, and then it would condense on the ceiling and drip down. Like we had so many issues to overcome there, but it really started to take off. So we could only fit about 10 people in there in a class, but we were just adding classes and adding classes. And it was so much fun to have our own space. Like it was amazing. However, it, like he said, was in the bottom of a condo building, and the neighbors were
Always the neighbors.
They hated us. And because the thumping, like the repetitive
Of
thumping
course.
from doing jerks and stuff, and you got 10 people doing it at the same time, it would reverberate through the whole building. So that was probably one of the most like stressful. I mean, we have a lot of stressful situations coming up over the next couple of years, but that was the first one that really like kept me up at night and was making me like, because I do not like not being liked. Like
Yeah,
I don't
fair.
like it, just having people, like the neighbors would come by and they would scowl at me or yell at, like walk by and open the door and like swear at me and stuff. And I just couldn't handle it.
Well,
We
and it's
designed it.
stressful too, because like there could be implications if there's a strata involved and things like that. And then if you're dealing with notices and having to mitigate while you're trying to grow and run a business, it's just this extra stress that you have on top of it.
Yes, the board started sending us notices and then hitting us with like fines. And every time there's a complaint, and there was really, it was becoming clear that this space was not going to be perfect for kettlebells, even though we thought it was originally. And we had done this beautiful build out, like, it was really a nice build out, but we actually were able to, we found another space again down the road, which was 3 times the size. We both knew immediately that we had to have it. We were able to sublet that space that we built out, the smaller space, to an aerial yoga business, which was actually a much better fit. And they had to hardly do any build out because we did such a good job. And but then the new building we got was over 100 years old, and it was a
What could go wrong?
furniture repair place prior, and they just closed up shop. And so that was our last build out.
That's where Seattle Kettlebell Club like really, really took off. So we went from being able to have 10 people in a class to eight, we had 18 platforms, and then there was like squeezing people in here and there. And then there was a back room that it took us a couple of years to actually come up with the money and the time to build that out too. But we eventually were able to build out like a second workout room in the back. And by March 2020, we were finally doing it. We were full waitlisted classes. Like we had just because there was a point in there where like we were both walking to work because our tabs were expired and we couldn't afford to pay the ticket we'd gotten for the tabs expired to get new tabs. And but we knew that we still had to have the help because we had all these classes. So we had at one point like 8 employees. They're all, like they're getting paid, and we're walking to work and like borrowing money for payroll. And it was so stressful, but we could also see it growing like right in front of us. So it was an amazing experience. But it was January was the first time that we actually like paid all of our bills on time and said, we're finally making what we need to make to run a business.
And at this point, you've gone through quite a bit of adversity from hopping around. Every move, I'm sure, was a massive stress because you have this growing family at the same time. You know the vision is strong. It is being, utilized by the community that you've clearly created and that believes in you so much if they're willing to help you. And that's one of the things that I love about like boutique and smaller gyms is that sense of community that can be fostered so greatly. And then I know what's coming because with just the signaling of March 2020. So what happens?
So we had finally figured out how to onboard people and get people to stay. And we were actually crushing it. We'd figured some stuff out. And then of course, COVID hits.
Everything happened within the first week. So our last class was on a Monday at noon. And then I went home and said, okay, we've been talking about doing online classes for a long time. And we'd also talked about growing beyond, how do you grow Seattle Kettlebell Club beyond Seattle? So we already had it in our head that we would be Pro Kettlebell, and that would be like a bigger, all-encompassing organization that we could grow with. These were nuggets of ideas already, but I went home, built a new website, got everything online, and we were driving into the gym when we weren't supposed to be on the road even to meet at to our private gym that people were like, you can't go to your gym by yourself in your own car. Like
Heaven forbid.
It was so crazy. So we were sneaking to go film each other in the gym to have the online workouts to put online. But we did it, and we did a kettlebell checkout. So people would book a time and the members would come down and we would check them out a kettlebell and they would take it home. And
smart, so smart.
Home. So thankfully that was one thing we had over 200
That is so
kettlebells.
Brilliant too, because I remember that period in time, and anyone that wanted any semblance of gym equipment, which was everyone that was into fitness that couldn't access their spaces, like what a beautiful problem solving for your clientele as well, because it is such a versatile piece of equipment. So brilliant.
People were calling us asking to buy our equipment, and also I swear there are people casing the building.
I bet.
And looking to break in. I mean,
we got the call from the manager, a trainer from the Sounders,
Seattle Sounders soccer team.
Yeah.
They wanted our
bills.
kettlebells, but they didn't want to pay for them.
Yeah, it was so crazy. No.
But it was
we kind of have some bills right now, clearly, if we're not bringing in people into our gym.
People were desperate for exercise, though. It was really, it was strange because they couldn't go to their own gyms.
And suddenly they want it,
Yes. Definitely.
So, but we did have more time on our hands. We were filming, a couple of classes, but normally we'd be doing classes from 5 a.m. till 9 p.m. But now we're only filming maybe a couple classes a day. And we're not the type to just, we don't stand still.
Shocking based on this entire story.
Right.
And we've been talking, we've been talking if we were to, one of our hardest problems with client acquisition was getting people to try kettlebells and then stick with it, because they're just a little bit uncomfortable on the back of the arms. And people would always say, is it supposed to hurt? You know what I mean?
I have a video. I haven't done, not to interrupt you there, but I haven't done a lot of, I'm an avid workout enthusiast, but I am more that traditional bodybuilding style of lifts. And I just started doing some kettlebell workouts, and I have a video of how awkward I look when I was first doing the movement, because I went through exactly that. I was like, does my wrist go this way? Everything feels funny. So I 100% relate to exactly what you're saying here.
Right. And it's because they were never designed, a dumbbell was designed to be lifted that way, right? A kettlebell was never designed to be lifted the way we lift it. It was designed to be a scale weight. And, you have your kettlebell as your weight standard, and you have your bushel of hay on the other side, and your weights up. But then these markets people started having competitions and trying to outdo one another, but they never really changed the design. The fact that it could be swung and used ballistically is great for it, but it always felt uncomfortable. And unless you're accustomed to discomfort, they couldn't get over that. And that's why it's remained very niche. So when we had this opportunity to extra time on our hands, we're this is the time.
So he says, this is perfect. We're gonna make our own kettlebell. And I said, no, we're not. Like, no, we're not. We have like a second to breathe and figure out how we're going to do the new online classes and the other stuff. Like, we're not 2 weeks later, we're in our first like CAD design meeting with an engineer and we're working on it. And at some point I do get on board with the ideas, but like the initial reaction is always that it's just too big. Like he thinks long-term and I think short-term. So we're a good team that way.
Yeah, I was
but,
going to say that's a good balance because I mean, definitely like the dreamer you need for the innovation, but sometimes because I can be a little bit of a dreamer myself, and it's important even with my own husband, he's kind of that you need the little voice of reason for certain things sometimes that when you are in dreamland, you may overlook. And then it just makes such a nice pairing when you have both of those pieces together.
For sure. Because you're like, okay, well, how do we get there? You have to have someone going, well, how are we going to get there in the most efficient manner? So we started working on this kettlebell design while the gym was closed.
We started sharing CAD drawings on our Seattle Kettlebell Club social media. People were kind of getting excited about it.
Also, meanwhile, I've listened to some of your other podcasts, and I know that like there was one guy who's like, I called and I said, we're not paying rent. This isn't my fault, you know, and as far as while the gym is still closed. And Seattle is very, you know, we were the first people to shut down and we stayed shut. And we were paying the rent. I did not make that call because, you know,
fair.
like,
It's a risky call for sure. It's not necessarily going to go well, like with that particular choice.
No. So I kept paying. And meanwhile, you know, the members, they were all stuck with us at first. And then every passing month, it's like, I'm really sorry. I'm so sorry, but I got to cancel. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So this number is just like going down and down and down. And while we're working on
and developing a product isn't a free venture either.
CAD designers are not cheap.
No,
neither were the prototypes.
And you know, there was SBA money available for businesses at that point, and we were
dipping into that.
We were dipping into that to, you know.
No strangers to risk at this point. So
no,
kudos to you for going for it.
We didn't know if the gyms were ever going to come back. I'm pretty quick to say, let's focus on the online in this kettlebell.
So because the big key point of this too, that she doesn't know is that we only had a 4-year lease at that space because it was slated to come down and go become like an 8-story building. So we knew that we might not get to renew it now, because in a lot of scenarios they're like, yeah, we're going to tear it down, but then they don't, and you get to renew and renew and renew. But we could kind of see what was going on in the neighborhood, and we're thinking we might not get to renew. We were going to have a choice of either just to have to shut down the gym when we lost our lease, or move to another location in Seattle. That was going to be the choice. And then that became, by that point, like we had so few members left that it did not make sense. It was too big of a risk. You don't know where you're going to move to, all of the build out of it, who's coming. You had half of the people saying, you know, if you're enforcing the vaccination rules, then I'm out. And you had the other half of the people saying, if you're not enforcing the vaccination rules, then I'm out.
You couldn't win.
You couldn't win either way. And I was like, this sucks. Like, this is not fun anymore. You can't, you know, we just like taking care of people and making people happy, and everybody's healthy. Everybody's
ironic.
It was like we were not allowed to do business the way we knew how to do it best. And besides that, the rents were just continuing to go up, and another build out was out of the question. So I think we did look around for another space, but we couldn't find anything that was within our budget at this point with where our membership was at. We were heavily invested in this app and then the kettlebells, and we're like, we have to go all in on the kettlebells.
Which still breaks our heart, like looking at the pictures from the gym and everything. We still get messages all the time, like, when are you guys going to reopen? And it's super cool. We made something like really special.
You pour your heart and soul into something and you create something that's really wonderful and does create connection with other people. So all of those emotions are so valid. But what I will say is that the circumstances that were so out of your control, if it hadn't happened in this way, and life is funny every time when we look
Yeah.
back and do that audit, because in the moment, and part of my language, but you're kind of like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, it's the only way
Yeah.
you feel when it's out of control. But you look back, and I doubt, even though I know you two are very tenacious, but I doubt you would have moved so quickly and so certainly to make this next step happen if you hadn't been faced with this adversity.
The learning is really on the, everything always feels like we're playing catch up because we're learning
As you're
so
doing
much.
it.
We have done so much trial and error to finally end up with a product that we really love. But I cannot believe it's taken 4 years almost. Like,
Well, and a
I
lot of
cannot believe it.
determination, and a lot of times that it probably would have been easy to throw your hands up and say, we're done. But clearly by your story, so not your style, which is wonderful because Pro Kettlebell did come to life. So tell me, where is it at now and what makes it so unique?
The number one differentiating characteristic is that it has contours where your arm is supposed to sit. It took over 30 prototypes for us to get to the point where actually the angles match perfectly. A normal kettlebell has just a round sphere with a handle on it because it was just meant to be a scale weight in the beginning. And that round sphere sitting on the back of your forearm on that bone there, that radius creates a pressure point. And I was always noticing, because I compete in the sport as well, especially with people who do a lot of kettlebell work, they would get a raised bump on the back of their forearm,
Right.
callus. And eventually, a lot of times that callus would become infected and they'd get cellulitis. And that would have to have surgery or antibiotics. I'm like, this cannot be the way. And also like just trying to get new people to introduce
Of
them to
course.
kettlebells. Like my mother-in-law, for example, she's not going to deal with that. Like, even though like kettlebells would be great for her health and like help her golf game and all that stuff, like she's not going to go through that callousing period to develop that pain threshold to deal with kettlebells. So like that is what we're the most proud of, is that we solved that, where it spreads that weight out. And now it just feels like it actually is, it hugs your arm almost and it feels good. And it makes holding it more intrinsic. So you don't really have that kind of like, oh, what do I do with this thing or whatever. We also like, there's these things called fat bells or they're basically a circular dumbbell where your hands go on the inside. I was really intrigued by the ring on the bottom, and so we incorporated that bottom ring on our kettlebell so you could actually hold the bottom like a handle. Another thing, like people would drop kettlebells, it's just because they get swung a lot.
Yeah.
And they would roll all over the place. So we incorporated a flat spot on it. So like when they hit the ground, they don't roll as far. They're a little bit more stable. So there's like all these little things as like a gym owner and a class instructor and like person who competes. If a kettlebell was ever to be designed from scratch to be used for fitness, this is how it should have been made in the beginning, rather than basically a modified scale weight. That's where we are now. And right now, I'm heavy into the kettlebell sport aspect of it. We've kind of focused on getting it recognized in the US and all the kettlebell sport federations.
Smart.
And we've been successful doing that. And we're breaking records with our design because it's more ergonomic. The center of mass is higher. It just performs a lot better than other kettlebells. And so that's been good, but that's a small market. And now we're focused on the fitness market and trying to get in just the hands of people who are just for general fitness and sharing our love and our desire for kettlebells.
You've basically been doing market research for years and years and years and years and being very aware that there were things that could be better, and then being given through a terrible circumstance, but regardless, given that time and space to actually sink down and then having the guts and the courage to actually do it. I have no doubt that your story, like that type of tenacity and teamwork, obviously, between the two of you to make that happen is so commendable, because within the story that you shared, and I have without a doubt that there's probably story after story within each of those moments that you shared today that were probably so hard to overcome. There are so many humans that would be like, I'm done, I quit. No, why me? Victim mentality. And the fact that you were able to rise above that over and over again, that is just inspiration that you've instilled, I'm sure, in people, not just in your community, but by sharing your story with me today.
Thank you so much. I was like I got so emotional earlier about missing the club, but I just wanted to finish with that the when I went to the first competition in person, I don't know, a year and a half ago now, where people were using our bells. And it used to be if you go to a competition, it'd be like I'd be so focused on just our lifters, like, oh, the pro, Seattle Kettlebell Club lifters. And to see all these different people that I didn't know using our bells, I was like, oh my gosh, they're all our team. Like I get to root for everybody now, which is it. That felt amazing.
There's definitely so many periods, dark days, but luckily, because we were so opposite, one of us will be up while the other one's down, and then the other one will be up while the other one's down. So we do kind of bring each other out of the abyss when it feels like there's no hope.
When life imitates art, you're just like a kettlebell swing.
True, you get it.
Yeah,
you do. It is. It's a pendulum. Life's a pendulum, and it swings.
Exactly.
Sometimes it swings up, sometimes it swings down.
Yes, and luckily you two are just like on the teeter-totter together. So you've got the support from the other person cheering you on when you need it. What's kind of a little, I mean, you've shared so much inspiration today, but I always like to leave on a little nugget of wisdom. It could either be a motivational quote or just a thought from yourselves that we can kind of instill and fuel for people's days.
You have to do before you can be. You're not going to be great at something as soon as you start it. And you have to fail a lot of times before you get good at anything. And don't be afraid to fail. And
that's an important lesson. And I always appreciate when there's people that have garnered achievements that are able to like acknowledge and remind us of that. Because especially in the era of social media, it can be so easy for us to forget that there is struggle, but nobody really is posting the struggles ever. So we get this disillusionment that it's like just success and you're just up there and everyone's up there and they didn't struggle ever. And so I think it's just really important for us to remind ourselves that, if you want something, the path is rarely linear. Like in life, it's not. And without the contrast, I don't think we would ever appreciate the successes in the same way. So I thank you both so much.
Thanks,
Thank you
Krissy.
so much, Krissy. It's really a pleasure to talk to you.
You've just listened to the All Things Fitness and Wellness podcast, hosted by Krissy Vann. This episode was brought to you by Fitness World, your fitness, your way. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry insiders and influencers. Together, we're on a mission for everyone to live a life fit and well.